Well, let's first go to The Hague, where we're joined by the ICC spokesman, Fadi Al-Abdallah. Good to have you back on the program, Fadi. Bosco Ntaganda, convicted of war crimes. Is this a victory for international justice?
I think it is an important day for a lot of different parties. It's an important day for the prosecution, of course. The prosecutors saw that the judges convicted Mr. Bosco Ntaganda for all the 18 charges for which he has been charged. It's also an important day for the victims, for sure, because they saw that after such a long period for the crimes, and after that, the long proceedings, there is a concrete outcome with the verdict itself. After that, we'll see there will be other hearings for the sentence and potentially for the reparations. I think it's also an important day for Mr. Ntaganda himself, because he can see the outcome of this first phase of the proceedings, which is the trial, and he can decide if he wishes to appeal this decision before the appeals chamber.
Right. 18 counts, including murder, rape, using child soldiers, and sex slavery. Now, he's the first to be convicted of that. Tell me how important that is.
I think that was one of the priorities of Madame Fatou Bensouda, the ICC prosecutor, is to fight in a strong way the sexual violence, gender-based violence, rape and sexual slavery. She has adopted very clear policies on the matter and continuously encouraged the investigators and her team of trial lawyers to continuously see where it is possible, of course, and when there is evidence on that, to include these charges in the cases. And we can start seeing the fruit of that with this conviction.
Right. And one of our panelists, who will be appearing in a couple of minutes' time, Vava Tampa, sent us a question that he wants you to answer, Fadi, because he's not fully convinced that we've seen justice been served here. And one of the questions that he asked was, will the ICC ever dare to go after President Kabila or Kagame, so that's DRC or Rwanda, or will they continue to target low-ranking commanders? And we've heard a lot of this, right? That perhaps as egregious as someone like Ntaganda's crimes were, the ICC can more easily go after small fry in the context of these horrible wars, not people who are behind much worse, or allegedly behind much worse. Address that for me very finely, please, Fadi.
Well, first, let's put the issue of Rwanda completely out of the scope of the ICC. Rwanda and the Rwanda genocide were dealt by another international tribunal. The ICC has no jurisdiction over what happened in Rwanda. So this is not a question before the ICC. For the other potential elements, I can say that the records of the court has shown and demonstrated that there has been either arrest warrants or summonses to appear before very high-ranking officials, whether for Mr. Gaddafi when he was the most powerful person in Libya, for Mr. al-Bashir in Sudan, for Mr. Kenyatta and Mr. Ruto, the president and deputy president of Kenya, and so on, and for Mr. Jean-Pierre Bemba, who was the vice president of the Congo, for Mr. Laurent Gbagbo, former president of Ivory Coast. The question is not whether there will be a possibility to investigate and even to charge them. Of course, that has to be built on evidence. For example, for Mr. Bemba, the trial chamber had convicted Mr. Bemba for the crimes for which he has been charged, but then the appeals chamber had decided that there was not sufficient evidence for that. It's a matter of how much you can have evidence in order to build cases for the persons who are allegedly the highest responsible for that. And for this, you need to put in place a lot of practice, a lot of experience, very strong policies, and to be able to build sometimes in a progressive way the capacities, the network, and the cases themselves in order to get to potentially high-ranking suspects that, as we are speaking, they always continue to remain presumed innocent unless and until there is a final decision, sometimes from the appeals chamber, that they are responsible.
Okay, joining us from The Hague. Good to talk to you once again, Fadi Al-Abdallah. Well, let's broaden out this discussion now. In London, I'm joined by Vava Tampa. He's an activist and founder of Save the Congo, a campaign group working for peace in the region. In Brussels is Philip Reinkens. He's a professor of law and politics at the University of Antwerp. And in Nairobi is Jean-Maubert Senga. He's Amnesty International's researcher for the DRC. Vava, let's jump straight into it. Are you satisfied with Fadi's answer?
No, not at all. Far from it. The question I had put to him, it had nothing to do with the Rwandan genocide. The Rwandan genocide happened in 1994. The ICC has no mandate to look into crimes that took place before 2002. The question I had put to him, and he had skillfully managed to run away from it, is that Mr. Kagame, evidence has shown, a UN report of the UN Security Council has shown, has been implicated in the ordering, in supporting, abating militia gangs and warlords in Congo, responsible for the killings of millions of Congolese and the displacement of millions more. Minister Ntaganda was one of those elements. He was a Rwandan national, a Rwandan officer in the Rwandan army who was killing, displacing, looting in Congo quite clearly on behalf of Mr. Kagame and Mr. Museveni, both President of Rwanda and President of Uganda. And Ntaganda was also connected with Mr. Kabila, who's the President of Congo, right, who was at least the President of Congo. So for him not to address that issue, the fact that Mr. Kagame has been supporting and abating these people, similarly Mr. Kabila and Museveni, it's really disappointing. It simply shows how weak the ICC is in actually supporting the victim. We should be able to go against anyone, regardless of their status. When someone abates war crimes, the ICC should be able to take a stand.
Philip Reinkens, the fact that Ntaganda over the years was a hired gun for the Rwandans, for the Congolese and others, he's an ethnic Tutsi, this is all entangled. The borders of nation states don't quite recognize some of these things sometimes. The fact that he was many things to many countries over the years, and the ICC also didn't really go after him, or he was even given a government role many years after his alleged crimes were well known and he was indicted for them. Does it take the shine off this conviction? Are there more questions than answers that come out of it?
Yes, I would definitely think so. And I agree with what Mr. Tampa said. The answer of Mr. El Abdallah concerning the competence of the ICC for the 1994 genocide in Rwanda is obviously besides the point. Ntaganda was prosecuted in this case for crimes committed in the Congo, in Ituri, in 2002-2003. I should add that Ntaganda has been active, as his nickname suggests, Terminator, also in the North Kivu region back in 2008-2013. And it is quite striking that he's not just small fry, but he's also a loser. He gave himself up to the ICC through the US Embassy in Kigali because he feared he was going to be killed in an internal settling of scores in one of those multiple Congolese rebel movements, in that case the M23, which again was supported by Rwanda. So I agree with Mr. Tampa. It's victor's justice in the sense that the weak guy and the small fry has been, and rightly so. I mean, Ntaganda is a war criminal. There's no doubt about that. But those who are responsible higher up, I mean, even the judgment that condemned Ntaganda now refers on several occasions to Rwandan support through ammunition, arms, even troops in Ituri in 2002-2003. Although that is mentioned in the judgment, there is no consequence at all for someone like Kagame.
Jean-Maubert Senga, are we being too harsh here? We're saying this was a loser, he gave himself up, he was small fry in the context of the broader war, he didn't have as much blood on his hands as other people, this is victor's justice. Are we being too harsh? Should we be giving more credit to the fact that more than 2,000 victims participated in this process, and we've got a terrible person who's most likely to spend the rest of his life behind bars in The Hague.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I think the conviction of Bosco Ntaganda is still a good step and a positive step. If it's upheld in appeal by the court, it will definitely be a good thing for the victims of Ntaganda's heinous crimes in Ituri. But what Vava Tampa and Professor Regents have said is also true. The gap for justice in that region, and especially in DRC, is huge. And Ntaganda's conviction appears to be still like a drop of water in an ocean of impunity. And what is expected from the ICC, but not only the ICC, the wider international community, is to put in place a comprehensive justice strategy to address the widespread impunity in DRC that has been ongoing for over 25 years, and where, you know, above Ntaganda, there are people who must be held to account, and under him there are many others. But that cannot be the job of the ICC alone. It has to be a business of the entire international community.
Vava, as was mentioned, you know, he lived freely in Eastern Congo for about 7 years while he was wanted by the ICC. Diplomats, peacekeepers, the UN was there, everybody knew where he was. Even in your piece in The Guardian, you said you knew where he played tennis, right? But nobody nabbed him at that time. He was absorbed into the army long after many of his crimes were alleged and known. With all of that in mind, is it right when Jean Maubert Senga says that this is just a drop of justice in an ocean of impunity?
Look, for those of us, and Jean Norbert is one of those people, him and I have fought in this fight for pushing for justice. So for those of us who had witnessed or spoken to people who had been victims of Bosco Ntaganda and other war criminals in Congo, it's an important day, and I recognize that fact, but I also recognize, we also recognize, all of us, as a community, as a country, that this is, as Norbert has said it, a drop in an ocean of impunity. Bosco Ntaganda, like Laurent Kunda, like other people, are small fish. And until we start going after the commanders, the enablers, people who gives them guns, people who gives them money, people who gives them armies to go and commit those crimes, nothing is going to stop. The ICC has been investigating the situation in Congo since 2003 or 4, and we have had about 4 or 5 convictions, but nonetheless, impunity continue, the killings continue, the rape, the exploitation, the illegality continues, and it continues because those people responsible for those crimes remain untouched. Amongst those people are President Kagame of Rwanda, President Museveni of Uganda, Joseph Kabila, who was the ex-president of Congo. Those are the key people that we need to target. And just to build on one thing, another issue.
I want to ask you something related to what's happening on the ground right now. Now, clearly, the situation is not as bad as it was in the 1990s, right, or the early 2000s. It's not as bad as that, but there's still a lot of trouble, especially in Eastern DRC. Can you see any positive impact on what's happening on the ground right now? With a verdict such as this one, can it have any tangible positive impact on the ground in trying to ensure peace and justice right now on the ground?
Look, I remain faithful, I remain hopeful and optimistic, not because of the international community per se or the ICC per se, because of the resilience of the Congolese people. We are a people that had lost over 5.4 million people in a space of 10 years. We are a people with 4 millions of our brothers and sisters displaced in the country. In spite of all of that, we continue to do amazing things. We continue to fight for justice. We refuse to give up. So I remain hopeful because of our people. However, in terms of the international community, and this is a broader issue here, because impunity is at the heart, peace begins with justice. Because impunity is at the heart of the situation in Congo, one of the elements which we now need the international community to embrace and put in place is the creation of either a special chamber or an international criminal court justice for Congo, so that everyone responsible for these crimes could be brought to justice.
Okay, and that's an interesting point, because then it's a complex web, because it involves other countries such as Uganda, Rwanda,
it does.
Burundi,
it does.
And so on, right? I have less than 2 minutes left. I want two final comments from Philip and Jean-Mabe Senga. So, Philip, very briefly, only 4 convictions since 2002, all African warlords of sorts since the ICC was created. Was it worth the effort, Philip?
Oh, yes, I think so. I mean, the world is a better place with an institution like the ICC than without it. And one must hope it will become more efficient than it currently is. And one must hope, of course, also, but there are many reasons that this is not happening, that suspects in other countries in the world will be indicted and convicted as well. So, yes, I think the ICC is worth proceeding with. It needs to improve. And it, at least in principle, it puts an end to impunity, although I share the views of my colleagues on this show that right now, in actual fact, this is not really what we expected it would become.
Jean-Mabe Senga, in less than 30 seconds, please, because I really have to wrap. I'm out of time. Wrap us up.
So as I said before, this is a good step, but this is not enough. And people of DRC are still waiting for further actions by the international community, including the ICC, to address the impunity epidemic in DRC. And until that is done, I think people will continue to express their discontent.
Vava Tampa, Jean-Mabe Senga, and Philip Reinkens, a pleasure to have you all on the program.